The first sign was not a message, not a stain on a shirt, not a story that didn't add up. It was the way our dinners became quiet, the way plates cooled while words evaporated in the space between us. The apartment held its breath. The city outside kept humming, scooters on wet asphalt, a TV from the flat below, the intermittent bark of a stray, but inside, the sound was the scrape of cutlery on ceramic and the private friction of two people trying not to touch. The rain that night started early, thin and uncertain, like it was asking permission. She lit a candle anyway, for habit, not for romance. The flame trembled like it was ashamed of itself. Her name is Myra. She always kept her hair tucked behind one ear when she was focused. That night she kept tucking it back even though it didn't fall forward. A nervous loop. I watched her do it and understood nothing except that something had changed and had decided not to announce itself. She asked me about my day like she was reading a roll from a script. I answered like a man who knew the lines but not the story. We laughed at the right moments. We didn't look at each other when we did. After dinner, she said she had to finish something for work. UX audit deadline. Her boss is breathing down her neck. I said okay and cleared the plates, rinsed them under water that ran too hot. My palms reddened. The steam fogged my glasses and I took them off and left them by the sink. I folded the dishcloth carefully, like control could be stitched into corners. She disappeared into the study, the small room with the narrow desk and the plant that only lived because I remembered to rotate it to the light. It's the waiting that becomes its own animal. Waiting teaches you every sound the house can make. The elevator cables sigh. The neighbor's pressure cooker releases. The kettle burbles when it's almost there. After an hour, I walked to the bedroom and found the bed too neat for how late it had become. Her side of the wardrobe was closed. My side cracked open. A line of dark shirts like men standing at attention with nothing to salute. My phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed twice with spam and once with a friend's reel I didn't open. I lay down, then got up. I sat, then stood. I opened the balcony door and felt the rain mist my face. I closed it because it made the room smell like goodbyes. The discovery wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on a collar. No perfume from a stranger's wrists. Just a laptop left unlocked and a folder called Final sitting where it didn't usually sit. She rarely left things open. She's meticulous, near ritualistic about closing loops. The screens glow through a pale rectangle onto the living room wall like a small, quiet cinema. The mouse was still warm. I touched it and the cursor woke, carefully curious, and I hovered over the folder like it could bite. Maybe this is the part where a better man would step back. Maybe this is where trust would become a choice and not a test. But the night was long and her door was closed, and our empty plates still glistened in the drying rack as if they were listening. My heart did that strange hollow thump, the one that sounds like an elevator arriving. I clicked. Inside. Screenshots, PDFs, photos. Nothing scandalous at first glance. A hotel invoice. A calendar invite with a title that wasn't a work title. Check-in call. A location pin sent late at night. A note to self. Don't forget charger. Another. Remember to breathe. Then the messages, not on the apps we usually use, but an email thread, coded in the way people try not to be seen while being seen. There were no explicit words, no confessions that could be printed and held up as evidence in court, but the affection was threaded through the grammar like contraband. The way she wrote "you" was softer. The way he replied with ellipses, as if each pause was a brush on a cheek. His name was in the signature block of one forwarded invoice, Arjun, a product manager at a partner company. We had met him once briefly at a launch event, when he shook my hand and said nice to finally meet the better half, and Myra laughed and squeezed my elbow in that 3-second way of reassuring me and redirecting the attention. That was months ago. It felt like watching an old clip of a show I didn't know I was a guest on. I clicked the photos. The first was harmless, a coffee cup on a windowsill. The second, the city through a rain-glossed pane. The third, her hand next to another hand on a table, both out of focus, rings a blur. The fourth, a view from a hotel room of a swimming pool no one was swimming in, blue like a bruise. The fifth, a selfie I knew was hers but wasn't meant for me. The angle, the softness around the eyes, the way she only smiles like that when she is being seen by someone who sees her in a particular way. I sat back. The chair made a small complaint. People say the body knows before the mind admits. My stomach had been a fist for weeks. My sleep had been a thin film of water the slightest breath could ripple. Now it was as if someone had opened a window in winter. The cold wasn't dramatic. It just came in, steadily, and made itself at home in the bones. I didn't shout. I didn't march to the study and demand names and times, and how could you? I closed the lid of the laptop, and the room went dark except for the streetlight making an orange coin on the curtain. I could hear her chair roll slightly and stop. Maybe she was leaning into a screen. Maybe she was closing one. I poured water. I didn't drink it. I considered the word final and what it meant and who it was final for. Around midnight, the study door opened. She walked past me with a quiet sorry in the curve of her shoulder. "You're awake," she said, as if the night were a question. "Yeah," I said, because it was the only word I had that didn't feel like a lie. She reached for the laptop on the table, and I watched her fingers hesitate over the lid, as though touching it might trigger something. She opened it. I saw the flicker of the login screen reflected in her eyes. Without looking at me, she typed, then went straight to Finder. She didn't search for the folder. She knew exactly where it was. She clicked it, selected all, dragged to the trash. Her face didn't change. She emptied the trash like a person brushing crumbs from a shirt. The progress bar crossed a small distance that felt like a continent. "You working late?" I asked. My voice was a stranger in my mouth. "Just cleaning," she said. "Just clutter." She closed the laptop and turned to me, and her mouth opened like she might tell me everything, and then closed like she might save me from it. She set the laptop in her bag. "I'm going to sleep," she said. I nodded because language is a bridge, and sometimes it's safer to stand on the bank and wave. She walked to the bedroom. The hallway shadow cut her in half and then gave her back to the dark. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder just because I was listening. I sat at the table and stared at the place where the folder had been, like an old crime scene with new paint. My phone buzzed with a bank alert I didn't read. The rain flushed the gutters. In the morning I told myself I would ask her, not accuse, not perform. Ask. Ask like asking could keep us from a cliff. Ask like asking might build a door. But the night is long when it knows something you don't want to know, and it leaned in and said quietly, "She deleted everything." And then it added, in a voice that sounded like mine, "But you didn't." The folder was still in my head, intact, untouchable, growing pages while I tried to breathe slow. The candle had burned itself small. The wick curled like a question mark. I blew it out and the smoke rose, blue in the dark, a slender ghost that refused to decide which way to go. And that's when I remembered the other folder, the one she didn't know about. The one on the old external drive in the top drawer, where backups slept like fossils. I put my hand on the drawer and didn't pull. Not yet. Across the apartment, a door hinge whispered. Then the quiet returned and sat with me like an old friend I had never wanted to meet. I went to the drawer. I wrapped my fingers around the cable. I lifted the drive and felt how heavy something small can be. Then I stopped, holding the weight and the question, and the rain began again. The first night after the folder vanished, sleep refused me like a host who's certain I was at the wrong party. The ceiling fan traced slow circles in the dark, its blades cutting the night into quieter nights. The city outside surrendered to a lullaby of tires through puddles and a dog's dream bark. Next to me, Myra breathed with the even discipline of someone who had chosen sleep. Each exhale was a metronome. I lay there counting, measuring the distance between us in seconds. Morning made everything honest. Gray light stepped across the floorboards with careful feet. The apartment looked like it had been left behind by gentler people. Coffee smelled like an apology that hadn't learned words yet. I made 2 cups by habit, then poured one down the sink because habit felt like betrayal. When she came out of the bedroom, her hair was damp, her eyes the pale of emptied lakes. "You're up early," she said, and her voice tried to be Sunday. "We should talk," I said. She sat at the table like it was a witness, her hands folded. She looked at the window, not at me. The rain had calmed to what the weather app calls drizzle, the kind that sticks around and doesn't announce itself. About what? I thought about how truth comes in shapes. You can throw it like a rock, or you can set it down like a bowl of water for a thirsty animal. I chose the bowl, about us. Her lips pressed together, then softened, then curved into a small, tired smile. "We're okay," she said, "just busy, stressed." "You deleted a folder last night," I said, and watched her flinch like I'd switched on a light in a dark cinema. "Work," she said too quickly. "Clean up." "Arjun," I said, and the name fell into the room like a dropped glass. The silence that followed was not a cliché. It wasn't heavy or alive or pregnant with meaning. It was the silence of someone realizing the room they thought had 4 walls actually has none. She looked at me then, truly looked, like she had been avoiding my face because faces tell the truth even when mouths don't. "How?" I didn't tell her about the folder, or the external drive. I didn't tell her that betrayal sometimes feels like a blessing because it tells you where the floor is. I just waited. She shook her head very slightly, a tremor more than a movement. "It's not." "Don't," I said, and surprised myself with how gently it came out. "Please don't do the half-truths. It will only make it worse." Her throat worked around a swallow. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words were so soft I almost missed them. I don't have a this wasn't supposed to. People think there's a right question. Like if you ask why or when or how many times, you'll unlock a door that leads to relief. There is no door. There's a field and you're in it, and the grass is tall and you can't see the road. She reached for my hand and then stopped halfway and folded her fingers into their original prayer on the table. It was like stepping into a reflection that looked kinder, she said. I don't know when it started. I just know that I felt seen in a way that felt new. New can be a trick, I said. New is just old things with better lighting. She almost laughed at that, then swallowed it. I ended it, she said. It's over. That's why you deleted the folder, I said. She looked down. I didn't want it in this house. I thought of the old drive in the drawer. I thought of ghosts that live in circuits, the kind that don't need rooms. It's still in this house, I said, and tapped my chest lightly. It's in here now. For days after, life became a choreography of small mercies and small cruelties. She would bring me tea and place it carefully by my laptop, not touching my shoulder. I would wash her mug and leave it upside down on the rack, not looking at the rim where her lipstick was not. We slept on opposite edges, a shoreline and another shoreline with an ocean that refused boats. The apartment developed new routes, new diagonals that avoided collision. Even our shadows tried not to overlap. The other man took on the shape of an echo. I saw him in all the places he had likely not been. A bus stop where Myra once waited longer than necessary. A cafe table where the napkin holder had a smudge. The lift mirror where she fixed her hair and looked at herself as if she were being looked at by someone else. I checked myself against madness. I didn't search their names together. I didn't comb his LinkedIn for signs of charisma. I didn't stalk, but grief doesn't need apps. It uses the corridors of your own mind, autofilling ruin where there might have been nothing. Sleep, when it came, undercut itself. When the dreams were kind, I woke with wet lashes. When they were rough, I woke with the taste of metal and the idea that I had run without moving. Work became a lifeboat and an anchor. Something to cling to and something that dragged. Emails piled. Edits to scripts felt heavy with metaphors I didn't want to notice. A voiceover about a father forgiving a son. A thumbnail brief about heartbreak that made me shut my laptop and sit with my fists pressed into my eyes until stars sparked. On the fifth day, I opened the top drawer. The drive lay there, black, indifferent. I plugged it in and watched the light blink itself alive. I navigated the backups like standing at the edge of a lake and skimming a stone. Folder structures that were both familiar and foreign came up. I typed a search term I wasn't proud of. The results filled like a mouth inhaling. There it was, not called final, named innocuous things. Notes, drafts, temp, I clicked through. The hotel invoice there. The messages there, threaded in emails and exported from a messaging app that had promised them secrecy but not permanence. Screenshots of sunsets like excuses. A voice note I recognized from the waveform curvature alone. Her voice, telling a story about a street dog that followed her for 3 blocks. The way she laughed in it broke something very quietly in a place I hadn't known to guard. I didn't listen to all of it. I couldn't, but I listened enough to understand the shape of what had happened. Not a fling, not an accident. A slow migration of attention, then affection, then touch. The way these things begin is always the same even when the details are different. You save the best parts of yourself for someone who hasn't seen you at your worst, and you mistake that rationing for happiness. I copied everything into a folder of my own and named it Nothing Anyone Would Notice, Tax Receipts 2022. I sat with that irony until it tasted sour. Then I printed one thing. A screenshot of a message I didn't fully read but knew was the one that would end arguments. Not the most explicit, the most undeniable. I slid it into a clear plastic file, the kind we use for scripts, the kind that says professional and adult and rational. I placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't plan what I would do with it. I only knew that the existence of a physical object that contained the question I had been living with made the room feel less like a trick. That night, I made dinner. I made too much, like a person who buys insurance. She came home late and took off her shoes one at a time, carefully, like they were asleep. "It smells good," she said, and didn't say "I'm sorry" out loud, but I heard it anyway. "Sit," I said, and she did. We ate. We tried words. They were clumsy. She dropped her fork and laughed at herself and then put her hand to her mouth as if laughter was illegal now. "I wish I could fix this," she said to her plate. "You can't," I said. "We can only live it." After dinner, I walked to the desk and opened the drawer and held the plastic file like a man holding a photograph of a country he might never visit again. She watched still, eyes wide but not pleading. I set the file on the table between us. The room drew itself up. The rain paused, listening. "I know you deleted everything," I said. "I know you wanted this house to be clean." I tapped the file gently, "but some things don't vanish that way." "What is that?" she asked, though she already knew. Her voice was not as steady as she hoped. "It doesn't matter what's inside," I said. "What matters is that it exists, that it's here, that it is proof of a choice. Yours, mine." She looked at it like it had heat. Her hand twitched and then retreated. "Do you want me to read it?" she asked. No, I said. I want you to know that I could show it to you, that I could choose that I'm choosing this instead, to not read it together, to not swing it between us like a weapon, to let it be a weight we both admit to and then see if we can carry it without killing each other. My voice surprised me. It sounded like someone older, someone who had watched enough sunsets to understand they do not negotiate with you. She nodded, a small, slow bow. Okay, she said. Okay. We sat, the refrigerator hummed, then clicked off. The building's water pump coughed and then quieted. Somewhere, a child cried out once and then settled under a parent's hand. Our plates dried on the rack. The file lay between us like a small night. I didn't touch it again. Not that night. Not the next morning when I left early, and she was still sleeping on that careful edge of the bed like a person afraid of falling off the world. On the 8th day, a message from an unknown number arrived. Is everything okay? It wasn't addressed to me. It was meant for her. Wrong number, or not wrong, inevitable. I stared at it until the 3 dots appeared and then disappeared and then the message deleted itself. The trace remained like a ghost's footprint. In the bathroom mirror, I looked for the man whose hand shook when pouring coffee. He wasn't there. Instead, there was a man who looked tired and measured, and more alone than the room suggested. I wiped the steam with my palm and left a streak. The turning point wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confession or a grand gesture. It was standing in the balcony in the late afternoon, the light a soft bruise, watching the rain pretend to start and then change its mind, when I realized I could breathe without thinking about breathing. The air went in, it came out. It didn't ask me to make meaning of it. I looked at the plants we had almost killed and revived. The money plant had sent out a new leaf, small and shy. Life, indiscriminate as always, kept moving in directions it wasn't asked to justify. Inside, on the desk, the file waited. I touched it once as I passed, like a person greeting a sleeping dog. I didn't need to open it. I needed it to exist. Sometimes resilience is not lifting something heavy. It's not lifting it and knowing you could. That night when I lay down, Myra turned toward me in the dark. I miss you, she said, voice tiny. I know, I said, because knowing is not fixing. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I said. I'm just learning how to love myself in a house that forgot for a while. She reached across the gulf, stopped halfway again, withdrew. Rain tested the window. The fan wrote circles above us. The quiet grew a spine. Somewhere deep in that quiet, I felt a new edge forming, not an ending, a cliff, and from somewhere I couldn't map yet, footsteps approached it. It didn't happen as a single dramatic knock at the door. It happened incrementally, in the way light returns to a room that's been dim a while. Myra began to come back, not with promises. She had learned that promises are too bright to look at. With gestures, she put fresh sheets on the bed without asking which side I preferred. She replaced the cracked mug I used every morning, the one I insisted was lucky because it had survived a fall. She left a note on the fridge, dinner at 8. Your favorite doll. The handwriting looked like it wanted to be forgiven, but wasn't going to ask. A week after the file lay down between us, she asked if we could talk without the edge of bedtime cutting into the conversation. We sat at the dining table again. The candle stayed unlit. The city offered ambient comfort. A distant train, the rise and fade of a horn, the occasional thump of footsteps above from the child whose energy seemed immune to adult sorrow. I told him it's over, she said before I asked. I blocked, deleted, burned the bridge. It doesn't undo anything, I know. What did he say? I asked, and regretted the question while it was still leaving my mouth. He said he understood, she said. He said he wanted me to be happy. She laughed once without humor, as if happiness is a thing someone can hand you over the counter. We sat with it. She traced the condensation ring her glass made on the table, a halo that kept forming and fading. I want to tell you why, she said. Not to justify, to map it. I nodded. Maps help even when the country is on fire. She talked. Not in a torrent, in small, careful pieces, like laying down tiles. She spoke of feeling invisible in a house full of practical love, of the way routines can become silent in their efficiency. She spoke of being tired of being good at everything that didn't touch the heart. She spoke of a day she felt pretty and no one noticed, of a time she cried in a bathroom and came out with dry eyes because there was a meeting. She spoke of how he laughed at her jokes like it was the first time anyone had told them. I'm not blaming you, she said quickly. This is not a ledger. I was the one who crossed a line. I was the one who walked into a dark room and closed the door behind me. I left the light off too, I said. I didn't see you, or I saw the version of you that didn't need seeing. We let that sit. Rain rehearsed at the window and then committed. I thought about dignity and guilt, how they are not opposite ends of a spectrum, but two weights we try to balance in the palms. She cried quietly, the kind of tears that don't need witnesses but don't mind them. I handed her a tissue. She took it like a peace offering and blew her nose bravely. I want to stay, she said. If staying is a thing I am allowed to want. Want is allowed, I said. Getting it is complicated. I know, she said. I will do what it takes. I'll go to therapy. I'll answer every question even if it's the same question every day for a year. I'll forgive myself last. Don't make punishment into a plan, I said. It's seductive. It doesn't heal. It just looks like work. She stared at me like I had read her homework. How are you so gentle? She asked. I'm not, I said. I'm tired, and I don't want to live in a house that punishes itself. If we can't be kind here, then we have nothing. Her return didn't feel like victory. It felt like two people deciding to re-inhabit a space that had been looted. We picked up small things and held them to the light to see if they were cracked. We went to the store and bought new salt because the old salt felt like it had listened to our worst conversations. We learned how to be in the same room again, without the air getting tight. She touched my arm from time to time like she was making sure I was still here. I touched her back lightly in the kitchen, like a person testing the temperature of a pool they might re-enter. We stumbled. One afternoon, her phone lit up with a notification that made her lift it too quickly. I saw it. I saw how fast she moved. I felt the old burn in my stomach. Who is it? I asked before I could be my better self. She looked at me. My mother, she said, and turned the screen so I could see the word Ma. Do you want to read it? She asked. No, I said. I want to not want to, but I do. And I won't. Thank you, she said, and put the phone face down like a promise. In therapy, we talked about grief like it was a third person in the room. We gave it a chair. The therapist said we were both carrying buckets with holes in them and asked if we were willing to keep walking anyway, making trails of water we might follow back someday. Myra said yes so quickly I almost forgave her in that instant. I said yes more slowly because slowness felt like the only honest speed. On a Tuesday evening, she cooked that doll. It was annoyingly perfect. Smelled like the afternoons we had spent in our early months, when everything was a discovery, and even laundry felt like a date because we were doing it together, and the machine's spin cycle was something to lean against and laugh. We ate with quiet appetite. After, she took plates to the sink. I stood beside her and washed while she rinsed, like we used to, our choreography finding itself in the muscle memories that affairs cannot erase. I went to the lake today, she said, eyes on the water slipping off a plate. What for? To sit, she said, to not call him, to not text, to think about what it means to be a person who broke something and still wants to build. And the birds didn't care, she said, and we both smiled, relieved by the useless wisdom of animals. The file remained in the drawer. Some days I forgot it entirely. Some days I could feel it like a stone under a thin rug. One night I took it out and put it on the table again. Myra looked at it, then at me. Let's open it, she said, voice steady. Let's look, and let's stop pretending there's a safer way through. I shook my head. I thought about it, I said. I had a fantasy where we looked, and then we burned it, and then we made love in the ashes, and the movie cut to black and rolled credits. But this isn't a movie. If we open it, we make our pain into a museum, and then we become curators. We will give tour. We will polish the glass. We will point out the interesting exhibits. We will never leave. She breathed out like someone had let her step off a stage. Thank you, she said, for not letting me make a cathedral out of a mistake. That night she climbed into bed and didn't keep to her edge. She moved toward me like a tide deciding it could risk the shore. Her hand found my chest. My heart tried to hide and then remembered it had nowhere to go. She whispered, tell me what to do. Stay, I said. Stay and make the morning not a stranger. We slept. It wasn't miraculous. I woke at 3 and stared at the ceiling for an hour. I thought of Arjun less like a villain and more like a symptom. The rage I'd been rehearsing turned out to be a play that didn't sell tickets. It closed in previews. What remained was something quieter, sorrow, like a companionable dog. It lies down at your feet. It sighs. It doesn't leave when you tell it to. But it doesn't bite if you don't stroke it the wrong way. In the morning, she was still there. Her hair had made a small nest on the pillow. Sun, rare and gentle, found the corner of the room that had always been kinder in light. She watched me watching her and didn't flinch. Hi, she said, simple. Hi, I said. We made coffee. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't rush forgiveness into a schedule. We agreed to take a walk. The street smelled like wet dust turning itself into stories. A man sold flowers out of a bucket. A woman scolded a boy for chasing a dog that didn't mind. Our fingers brushed and didn't hold, then brushed again and did. In the park, a bench waited. We sat. The world worked minutely at continuing. And then, because life is lazy with irony, Arjun appeared. He was on the path, head down, earbuds in, running the kind of careful run of someone who wants to age into health. He looked up, the recognition took a second to travel across his face, and then it was there, and then it was something else. Guilt, rehearsal, decision. He slowed. He stepped off the path. He stood 2 meters away, a distance that felt both polite and unbearable. "Hi," he said, breath fogging in the mild morning. "I wasn't expecting." "No," I said, "you weren't." Myra's hand tightened on mine. She didn't look away. He looked at her. "Are you okay?" he asked, unaware maybe, or unable to unlearn the habit of asking. "She's with me," I said, and heard myself and hated and loved the sentence in the same moment, for its simplicity, for its ownership, for its comfort, for its trap. He nodded. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice didn't break because he had practiced not letting it. I thought of 100 things to say that would be satisfying for a day and embarrassing for a lifetime. I chose none. "Take care," I said, "because what else do you wish a person who is now part of your family history, whether you vote for it or not?" He moved on. Myra's breath trembled and then steadied. We sat on the bench and let the sun work at our faces like a novice sculptor. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not making me choose a dramatic scene," she said. "For choosing me without a speech." "I didn't choose you," I said, and she looked hurt until I added, "I chose the part of me that believes I can live without needing someone to bleed for what they did. You happen to be sitting next to me while I do it." She nodded slowly. "I can live with that," she said. I believed her. Almost. When we walked home, the apartment felt a tiny degree warmer, like a window had been closed somewhere without anyone moving. We put on music, not our old favorites, the soundtrack to new rooms. She danced in the kitchen, badly on purpose. I laughed. The laugh clicked something back into place. That night the file stayed in the drawer, the drive went back to sleep, and I slept through until dawn. And still, in the quiet, in that blue slice of hour, a sentence formed like a cloud across a sky I had thought would remain clear. This might not be forever. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the truth standing at the foot of the bed, kind-eyed, saying, "You can hold each other and still have to let go someday." I watched the light climb the wall and tried to learn its language. Morning is when the world tells the truth and does not ask for your consent. The light that made our apartment a theater of longing at night made it in the morning into something else. A room with possibilities, some of which had nothing to do with love. The kettle sang, the fan rested, the plants turned their faces up. The city shook sleep from its shoulders. We moved through it together, quieter, gentler, like people who had learned the cost of speaking too quickly. Myra left early for a workshop. She kissed my cheek. The kiss was present and not a promise. "I'll be back by 6, she said, and a small part of me noticed that I believed her, and an equally small part of me noticed that belief had become a daily decision, not a reflex. When the door clicked shut, the apartment exhaled. I stood in the doorway of the study where the external drive was, where the file slept among pens and old receipts, and a USB light that had stopped working long ago, but which I kept because some dead things take up less space than saying goodbye. I took the file out and placed it on the table. The plastic made a soft sound like a raincoat. I sat. The chair knew my weight like it had been waiting to be useful. Letting go, I had learned, is not a performance. It is not releasing balloons into the sky or throwing a ring into a river. It is not even forgiveness, though forgiveness sometimes shows up with a small overnight bag and asks if it can stay. Letting go is the daily choice to not feed the thing that wants to eat your life. I opened the file. Inside, the printed pages looked like any other printed pages, the pale gray of screenshots, the crisp black of typed dates, the banal geometry of chat bubbles. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I touched the top edge of the stack and felt the fibers of paper catch my fingers' oil. The room was quiet in the way rooms are in the morning when they have not yet collected the day's noise. I stood, took the file to the balcony, and placed it on the table there. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still wore its memory. I lit a match. The flame flared, a bright brief thing, and then steadied. I held it to the corner of the top page. The paper took longer than expected to decide. Then it browned, curled, and let go. The black crawled along like a small animal that had learned how to move. I watched the words become ash. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a person making room in a drawer. Halfway through, the flame faltered. I cupped my hand and fed it air. It recovered, worked diligently at erasure. When only gray flakes remained, I pressed them with the back of a spoon into a soft, anonymous dust. I washed the spoon. I rinsed the balcony table. The water carried small particles toward the drain, and they joined the city's larger forgetting. Back inside, the apartment felt the same. The silence wasn't a choir. It was just silence. I put the empty plastic sleeve in the bin. The bin looked relieved. When she came home, I didn't tell Myra immediately. We made dinner. We talked about her workshop, about a woman who taught breathing like it was a craft, about the way everyone cried at the end and no one was embarrassed. "We are all so tired of being strong correctly," she said, and we toasted to being strong incorrectly sometimes. After I took her to the balcony, I placed my hand on the table where the ash had been. "It's gone," I said. She knew what I meant. Her shoulders dropped as if someone had taken a bag off them without her realizing she'd been wearing it. She nodded. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing that without asking me to be brave with you in public." "I didn't do it for you," I said. "Not only. I did it so I don't become a person who carries proof like a pet." She understood. The wind practiced a new direction. Somewhere a pressure cooker released, and then another, like applause in kitchens across the building. We laughed at that. We didn't declare anything. We didn't draw lines in permanent marker. We made tea. We watched a dumb show. We let ourselves be ordinary. It felt like cheating on grief with life. In the weeks that followed, we did the work that doesn't look like work. We learned each other again. The way she likes the fan just one notch higher than me. The way I like the balcony door cracked even when it's raining because I like the smell. The way we can fight without breaking. The way we can repair without ceremony. We went to therapy. We didn't always come away better. Some sessions were just the two of us being honest in front of a stranger who was trained to catch us if we tripped over our own sentences. I stopped checking her eyes for lies. She stopped checking my silence for traps. We had dinner with friends and didn't pretend we were perfect. We let them love us without turning their love into an audience. I took a day trip alone, sat on a bus and watched fields blur and didn't feel the need to narrate it into a lesson. She went to a reading and came back with a poem that hurt in a good way. We placed it on the fridge next to the grocery list. It read, "We are not what we did, we are what we do next." One morning, months later, the rain arrived the way it does in our city, sudden, committed, almost reckless. The apartment softened, the light went gray, the coffee smelled like a friend. She stood by the window, the same window where I had once tried to measure how long a marriage could hold its breath. "Do you ever think," she said, not turning, "that we loved each other one person too late?" "Yes," I said, "sometimes." And I'm still here," I said, "and you are too." She nodded. "We don't have to be," she said. "No," I said. "We don't." There are stories where walking away is the brave thing and stories where staying is. There are stories where both are. We didn't choose a category. We chose a morning. We chose to let the day reveal what we could carry. I held her. Not tightly, not loosely, like something that might break and might not. Later, I opened the old drive one last time. I didn't navigate to anything. I just looked at the icon, its small square bluntness, and understood that inside it were versions of us that had made choices we could neither bless nor change. I ejected it and put it away. I didn't tell Myra. I didn't need to. Some letting go is private, not secret. If you want a moral, there isn't one. If you want a villain, look in the mirror on a day when you are tired and honest and still kind to yourself. If you want a hero, look in the same mirror later, when you have done the small good thing no one will ever see. On a Sunday, we took the train to the sea. The sky did its enormous blue. The water performed its 1,000-yard stare. We didn't swim, we just stood with our feet in the froth and let the tide rewrite the sand around our ankles. Children shrieked. A man sold tea in paper cups that burned our fingertips. We drank and watched the horizon practice being both near and far. She took my hand. I didn't look at her. I looked at where our shadows touched and then didn't as the sun moved. We didn't say forever. We didn't say never again. We said another cup. And then we said yes, and then we said nothing and listened to the waves, which had learned how to be repetitive without being boring. The folder is gone. The house is the same and not. The rain will come and go and come again. Morning will keep telling the truth without asking. And in the quiet room, in the soft light, in the chair that remembers my weight, I breathe. Letting go, it turns out, sounds a lot like that. Go, it turns out, sounds a lot like that.